Well, here we are again. Not where we expected to be, but it's the 25th annual Fisher Poets Gathering, the second annual, and we do hope the final virtual Fisher Poets Gathering. And we're glad you joined us from wherever you are. We got folks from England, from Hawaii, from Alaska, of course, the coast, and lots of places. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for celebrating the 25th annual Fisher Poets Gathering with us here online. Tell your friends. We got an evening tonight of quick 5-minute reads from all kinds of people. Everything is on the website, the FisherPoets.org website, if you want to have a look and keep track of the evening reading schedules and the workshops tomorrow, and then readings again tomorrow night. And David Bean, my friend from Portland, is ready to join us. David, good to see you. Give us something from Portland, will you?
Well, yes, I will. Thank you very much for the 25th rodeo of the most wayward bunch in the world. Thank you, John, Jay, Amanda, Hobie, Sage, and all the others who make this a high point of my year. As time is short, I have crafted a poem for this very moment. Here it goes. It's called That Special Gaff. I saw a kid freaked out by the news. He had a case of the I got no future blues. I too had a case of those in '62, and I wanted to help him feel okay. So I began to tell him to use the use of tools in the old fisherman's way. A fisherman always knows the right tool to use, as I told this kid. He must know the difference between a fiddle and a fid, a cleat and a dog, a gill net and a seine. I showed him the difference between a bowline and a hitch, and oh, how this world some days is a pain. But with the right tool, I said, anything can be fixed. Back in 1962, the powers were learning how the missiles flew and exactly what not to do when Castro, Khrushchev, Kennedy cranked the nuclear screw. How tight, we kept asking ourselves before this whole thing blew. Back when I was a bait boy on the Salmon Queen, working for experience, still a little green, I asked the old salt how he could live with this imminent threat of thinking that every day the world would end. He leaned back and said, listen, my friend, we went through some kind of times like this before. That was back during the war. And we went through it. And here we are. There's not much to say anymore. Most of us have sailed the seas, have had our personal eye lock with destiny, being thrown from a bunk in a wild gale, a wrong step in the bite of a line, making eye contact close up with a whale. Then there's this hitch that enwraps us all together inside a cosmic knot hole, as if we're all holding hands in a pitfall. It grabs us by our guts, especially drives the young ones nuts, while old buzzards that we are seem to stand easy as from afar, as if not touched by the genuine horrors. We just say, is that so? Lucky for me, this isn't my first cosmic knot hole. One shows up about every 40, 60 years, and that thing sure snags all our fears. So be glad some of us have experience when it becomes time to get the right gear. Now then, where is that tool? I know it's around here somewhere, though 60 years have passed. It must be someplace, maybe in that gear locker, aft, beneath the underclutter, or up the bilge vent. Ah, that's where it's lashed. It still smells kind of Cuban. That tool we need right now, at last. The cosmic knothole extraction gaff. And aren't we lucky? The guy at the helm of the ship of state is known to be master of the gaff.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Nice kickoff, David. Yeah, I'm taking us from the 60s back to the 60s. Oh my gosh. So, yeah. Thanks for your wise words. Thanks for joining us again. We'll see you in Astoria next year. I think next up is our friend Annie Howell-Adams, who comes to us from Friday Harbor, fine artist and also a poet and storyteller, bringing us tonight, I think, stories from Southeast Alaska, perhaps. Annie, thanks for joining us.
All righty. Yellow bird. During my years as a commercial fisherman, paper charts were in use. 10 miles off Cape Spencer was a quirky notation in between fathom marks that read PD. What did PD stand for? Position doubtful. The area around this shifting location was known as the PD grounds. It was a place to fish for cohos miles offshore. Now imagine you're on the back deck of an old wooden salmon trawler. It's the end of the season, fall is descending. The weather hovers at the brink of fishable. Your hands are tucked into your dingy yellow Helly Hansens. No amount of layers can keep you warm. You lean into the corner of the cockpit for protection from the wind, but mostly to stabilize yourself from rough seas. You're waiting for the fish to bite, but they're not interested. Boats have all left the fishing grounds. There's no one to gossip about. Radio silence. An icy wind is blowing down off the glaciers of the Fairweather Mountains, way out to the PD grounds. Look at the rail. A tiny, bright yellow puff of a songbird landed on the starboard railing, panting. What are you doing here? This isn't the right direction to go. You should be back on land, eating bugs. We stared at the tiny yellow songbird, like a champagne cork of yellow joy. This was the first bright color we'd seen in days, other than salmon blood. Let's let him rest in the wheelhouse. Picking him up wasn't difficult. He was too tired to resist. While our little passenger recuperated in the wheelhouse, we discussed our good luck to have been in the right place to save the bird from uncertainty. If we hadn't been out here, he would have been blown all the way across the Pacific. This isn't any kind of place for a warbler, whatever he is. We wondered why our little yellow bird was so late in traveling south. Even the Washington trawlers had all left weeks ago. They didn't want to get caught in bad weather. We ran the gear with renewed enthusiasm. I climbed out of the cockpit to check on how our new crew member was doing. I peeked inside Marvel's wheelhouse. He was sitting on the fathometer. As I peered inside, I scared him. He flew out on deck and landed in the corner of the scuppers, tangled in the deck wash. Quick, pick him up. I reached down to pick him up, to help him. He didn't know I was trying to help. Instead, he flew up into the cold wind. Just at that moment, a wave slapped the side of the hull. Salt spray reached up and pulled the little bird down into the chilly water. I could see him on his back. The surface tension of the rough water splayed out his tiny wings. He was upside down, helpless, unable to flip over. Man overboard! I glanced around for something to throw out to mark our bird's position and started a wide sweeping turn to circle back and come around and come close enough to pick him up out of the water. Now, he was beyond our reach as we slid by. Out of nowhere, a massive seagull dove straight down like a missile. He devoured the little bird in one gulp, right in front of us. Just like that, our bird was gone. We solemnly climbed back into the cockpit, gutted, and pulled the gear on board. We covered the gear with burlap and pointed Marvel toward shore. Let's get out of here. The anchorage was quiet, remote, vacant. A soothing cup of tea warmed my hands as I sat on the hatch cover. Without the noisy diesel engine, sounds could be heard across the bay, piercing the heavy marine air. I couldn't help wonder about the bird. What was going to happen to the bird anyway? Why didn't I put him in something to bring him back to land? After killing fish all season, what did one little yellow bird matter? I sipped on my tea and thought, the bird was me, out offshore, in a place where I didn't belong, in a doubtful position, where danger and a small air could swallow me in one gulp. Thank you.
Wow, Annie, that's a terrific story. A lot of story out of one little bird. I'm glad you paid it such attention and kept it for us. Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that to us. Well, next up, Dennis McGuire comes to us from Cordova and Port Townsend and from a little boat on the high seas. Dennis, thanks for joining us. It's been a little while since we've seen you. Good to see you tonight.
Oh, it's good to be back. I'm still have a little poem here. What it is actually the beginning of the book I just published. And that's it right there. Calypso, the boat. Ballad of Calypso is the poem, and actually the book story. It's a combination of poetry, illustrations, drawn pictures, and prose. So here we go. This is the first, just getting out of it. It's called Herring Roe and Kelp Dive. This is an obscure fishery up in Prince William Sound that no longer exists, unfortunately. So here we go. Late March in Prince William Sound, icy snow covers the ground. Through glacial waters streaks the spring dawn. Great schools of herring have come here to spawn. The Alaska spring of 1979 is a banner year for the herring stocks of Prince William Sound. A bumper crop of herring roe and kelp, Kazunoko kombu, a Japanese delicacy, will be harvested from these waters this year. Untold numbers of these silvery schools will wind through their fjords. The waters will cloud up with milk released by the males to fertilize the eggs. The females will swim into the clouded waters and flutter their tails as they lay snow white eggs across the leaves of ribbon kelp, then which stream down over the boulders and intertwine in the hollows. Sieve kelp stands like giant cabbages in patches alongside of hair kelp. Hair kelp appears as sagebrush before the arrival of the herring. Ribbon and sieve fronds will receive a thick blanket of eggs. Layer after layer will flock the thin stranded limbs of the hair kelp, thick as Christmas trees. The scene presents itself as a winter wonderland to the diver. A circus atmosphere fills the air as barges are loaded for this grand affair. Kelp buying stations, these old wooden sleds, and a place where divers make their beds. Out on the grounds, get our skiffs ready, air compressor, pumping steady, waxing zippers on the suits, checking for holes in the bottoms of boots. The condition of the suit top notch throughout. Got to protect the diver from freezing out. Air hose coiled, kelp boxes stacked, with charcoal and cotton, the air filters packed. Working their skiff, the crew had dubbed Razzle Dazzle in honor of Jack London's sailboat during his oyster pirating days. They are filling their kelp boxes with ribbon, sieve, and hair kelp, which are heavily laden with herring roe. A compressor is pumping fresh air down to the diver on a hookah hose in the frigid waters of Valdez Arm. Icebergs the size of a small house calved from the Columbia Glacier beached on Bly Island, Rocky Point, and the shallows of Tititlic Narrows. Bergs and bergy bits are floating free in the nearby deep waters of the Arm. There's a new beauty down below, across the undersea landscape, a fresh herring spawn snow. The generation growing to life here on ribbon, hair, and elephant ear. Clams and urchins and cucumbers are fine, but herring roe kelp diving really sublime. Swimming straight down into this icy cold brine, filling our skiff with a product so fine. Diving hard 8 days in a row, we have $8 grand to show for that sailboat we've been wishing long before we started fishing. The quality of this season does entice, a very satisfying, healthy price. Leaving the grounds far astern, headed to town, money to burn. And there's a footnote on this chapter. It will only be 10 years before this wonder of nature, created over the eons, is destroyed by a reckless act. Excuse me. By a reckless act committed by those in the wheelhouse of the Exxon Valdez on March 24th, 1989. This will be ground zero, where the herring and their eggs will be destroyed. Excuse me. The water is made toxic, eggs covered in crude oil, the largest, most modern oil tanker in the world, fully loaded, will strike the reef a few hundred yards from where the razzle dazzle and crew are at work. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Dennis, for bringing that to us, bringing those good old days back, and loving the fishery like you do and continue to. Thanks for reading that for us. It's awful good to hear you. Well, next up, I believe, is our friend Brad Warren from Seattle. Brad, every time you play guitar, I just get chills. So I'm glad you brought it here tonight. Looking forward to hearing you.
You're kind. This is a piece called The 5 O'Clock Shadow, and it maybe grew out of not having sense enough not to play in waterfront bars when I was a young musician. It's another cold, rainy day, if you can call it day. Just a pallid imitation of a dim bulb in the sky, so the wharf rats can watch the boats wallowing low, and the tired crews can stagger to the 5 o'clock shadow. The 5 o'clock shadow. Crack a beer, let out a sigh. Tell me about the one that got away. Those emerald eyes, so they say. Oh, why the docks are full of lies. That's what keeps me in business at the 5 o'clock shadow. The 5 o'clock shadow. Don't call me to tell your lost fisherman. Maybe he's got his reasons. The whole harbor knows his warehouse is a grow. Girl, thought that boat was for fish. If you catch my drift, I'll buy you around at the 5 o'clock shadow. They say the kingpin in this town, he used to swan around with the whole same crew in tow. He was young and proud till he sat down for a round with a guy who plays for keeps. Oh, the secrets you could know at the 5 o'clock shadow. Now some folks say he's on the lam. The truth is, well, I ain't saying. If you're asking me who's paying, you sure you want to know? But take a look around and guess. Which one's a federal? He's looking high and low for the 5 o'clock shadow. 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 Thank you. Many thanks, really, to Jon and Amanda and all of you for keeping us here.
Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming. Thanks for bringing the 5 o'clock shadow. That was a new one for me. Nah, thanks.
Nobody saw him come. Nobody saw him leave. Nobody got a look at his face.
Yeah, that's good. Good. Well, we'll keep an eye peeled for what good it does. Thanks, Brad. I got a couple friends up there in Bellingham. We do. Buck, Meloy, and his pal Joe Deeny are going to join us tonight. Bring us tales from the Gulf someplace. Thanks for joining us, you guys.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Brad. Joe's going to read a story I wrote in 1999 called Potatoes, about salmon fishing in difficult weather in Alaska. He knows how to tell a story much better than I do. And I thank him for being willing to do this. So here's Joe Deeny.
Thank you, Buck. It's an honor and a pleasure to read this story. I hope to do justice to these good words. This is Thursday on the 1st of September, and we've been fishing nonstop since Sunday when we had a short break. I've been on the water since I left town 2 weeks ago. There are some 150 gillnet boats here in Controller Bay, about 100 miles from Cordova, the nearest town. We've come to catch coho salmon, which have been returning in unexpected numbers. The surprising strength of the run has resulted in a greatly extended fishing time and a fantastic harvest. Almost no one was quite ready for this. This many fishermen living in their small vessels require considerable support just for basic maintenance. Fuel, groceries, drinking water, ice for chilling fish, stove oil for cooking, all depend on the large tenders who motor out from Cordova to buy our fish. This is a complex task under ideal circumstances and a gargantuan one when productivity quadruples and the weather turns foul. Fortunately, we are happily compensated by the larger than normal paychecks. On the other hand, when one is working this hard and constant wind, wave, and rain guarantee that he is wet, cold, tired, and miserable, little things like something hot to eat or even just a cup of coffee can take on a much greater importance. So today, after grubbing around in the mess that is my larder, I found an old sack of potatoes, organically grown in Washington by my wife, that I had hastily dug there a month ago. Here, the oil stove is running, albeit poorly, because I lack the starboard list that makes it run so well. I will slow bake them, drench them in butter, and have them as a main course following a bowl of instant ramen Asian soup. I will reflect upon the distant verdant scene next to my rusting 1949 Chevy pickup, where they grew so well in the fertile soil of our backyard. I will think of the others still lying in the ground, waiting for my return when this is all over, and in how their skins were already yellowing, indicating their quiet readiness. This meal then will be the moment in my day that connects me to the life I live when I do not ache from overwork, when I do not yearn for rest from protracted lack of sleep, when I do not rock and roll, constantly confined to a space the size of a closet, and in a place where rain is exception rather than the rule. At each bite, I will be reminded of the lush green and flowering yard, nurtured so carefully, its myriad berries, apples, pears, its peas and beans, Brussels sprouts and corn, squash and tomatoes. Slicing the skin of a potato, I will recall my careless haste in digging it, how my digging fork upbraided and marked the tender, juicy surface. I will marvel that our household waste provides such a nurturing soil for a potato. I will ignore the wail of the wind in my rigging as I eat and contemplate. And I will not notice the constant motion of the vessel. This meal is both physical sustenance and spiritual succor. This meal will carry me forth into another day, for the moment unbowed by the oppressively gray and awful forces of nature that currently define my existence. Very nice words, Buck. Very nice words.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, well, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Buck. Thanks for reminding us how simple pleasures are what fuel our lives, really. Yeah, that's terrific. Thanks for bringing that back to us. Good. Well, after Buck and Joe, I think we have Erica Clark, Cordova gal, who's down here in Astoria with us now, and we're glad of it. She helps us plan this Fisher Poets Gathering thing. And Erica, are you nearby? Because we'd love to hear from you.
So I have a couple short pieces. The first one is called "I Want to Get You in a Bunk," and it's a piece I wrote about my now husband, then boyfriend, years and years ago. I want to get you in a bunk and wrap my legs around you. I want to drink sweet wine out of porcelain mugs and laugh until we cry. I want to cook our food on a diesel stove while our gloves hang above to dry. I want to make slow love to the sound of the waves as they drift on past my hull. Yeah, I want to get you in a bunk. Get you in a bunk and wrap my legs around you. I want to hear you moan, hear you mixed with the moans of the wind. And I want to run my fingers through your hair, through your soft, beautiful hair. I want to get you in a bunk. Get you in a bunk and wrap my legs around you. I want to cast a net and catch you up and wrap my legs around you. I'd like to anchor up in a quiet little cove and get on down to business. And when we're through, just me and you, all hot and salty and spent, I'm gonna look at you with a sly silver grin and say, let's do it again. I want to get you in a bunk. And this next piece is called Seasons. It is from a very different season of my life. Not a fisherman anymore. As I stand and stare out from the shore, I won't go to sea. It's not for me. No, I'm not a fisherman anymore. Instead, I'll raise these babies, even though they occasionally drive me crazy. I'm cleaning the shoreline instead of pulling up ground line. My kisses mend bumps and scrapes of all kinds quickly, like my hands used to strip cork line. I've learned the signs beyond flipping the bird, so I could teach my children the word for water, for food, for love. See, I want them to know just how far it can go if they care for the sea just like me, for the waters I've sailed on, from the ports that I've hailed from, for the fish on their plates when their dad's running late from towing someone safely to shore. No, I'm not a fisherman anymore. As a mom, I sing songs about packing along plastic bottles, old shoes, and used masks. And I know someday they will ask why I'm not a fisherman anymore. And the last piece is one that I wrote last year when I missed all of you here in Astoria. I was hoping I'd be singing it to you in person, but maybe, hopefully next year. And this is our ode to Astoria. Oh, Astoria, I am coming home to you. Oh, Astoria, I am trying to get to you. Want to stand on the river where the water meets the blue. Oh, Astoria, I am coming home to you. Oh, Astoria, I want to get to you. Oh, Astoria, I am trying to see it through, trying to walk by the river where the ship horns blew. Oh, Astoria, I am coming home to you. Oh, Astoria, I've finally got to you. Now I live where the water meets the blue, made my home right here on the sunny south slope. Oh, Astoria, I am never leaving you. Until next year, our friends will be sending you lots of love from Astoria, from me and the entire Fisher Poets crew here.
Yay! Oh.
That's my dad and my husband.
Oh, that's terrific. We're glad you're there. And we're glad you're here in Astoria, Erica. We're so glad you joined us. And you tell your dad and Dan hi for us. That's great. Well, and not too far from the other Astoria, I understand there's one over there. Oh, I think I was about ready to skip Doug here, but I see Ken's up next. But Doug is stuck someplace between Mexico and Craig, Alaska, and he'll tell us where, but he's heading home. Another Southeast Alaska gill netter. Glad to have you join us. Thanks for taking the trouble to get there from your.
Well, thanks,
from
John.
someplace
Yeah,
in
coming
between.
to you live from the Ramada Inn and the Spokane Airport.
Yep.
We just got back from Baja after a month or two down in a truck camper, and people sometimes ask, how do you and Cheryl handle staying in a little camper for so long down on a beach somewhere like that? And this poem is my answer to that. It's called 8 Feet of Total Freedom. If you've been living on a fishing boat all season long in a little confined space with a few plates and cookingware in it, all fits into a little place. If you've been living on a fishing boat from Alaska on over to Nantucket, you cook everything on a single burner and your crapper's a 5-gallon bucket. If you've been living on a fishing boat and things are still hard to find, and sometimes you have to step out on deck to have the room to change your mind. If you've been living on a fishing boat where a duffel bag holds all your clothes and you're in close proximity to your partners and no arguments have arose, then brother, you're ready for the camper life and you're going to be in luck. You got 8 feet of total freedom crammed into the bed of your pickup truck. It's not much different from living on a boat. You're always replacing 12-volt wires, but instead of checking for water in the bilge, you have to check the air pressure in your tires. You pull up to a beach for the evening and find a place out of the wind's whooshes. It's kind of like anchoring up for the night. You find a calm spot in the lee of the bushes. Sometimes the wind will rock you around and you can feel the shocks and suspension strain, but it's not all that different from dropping the pick and feeling the tug on the anchor chain. The galley table is about the same size, but to sit there, you should be a little bit thinner. More than once, I've had to work to get out after eating a really big dinner. Now, if you don't live on an island like us, you just might not understand, but it's kind of a novelty, you see, to actually get to drive around on the land. We like to drive down to Baja during Alaska's cold winter times and stock our little refrigerator with beer and ice and limes. And we're not the only ones doing this during the January and February dates. We run into others in the middle of nowhere, and a lot of them have Alaska plates. So if you've been living on a fishing boat, then brother, you're in luck. You'll be amazed at all the stuff you can cram into the camper on the bed of a truck. And I got one, and that's a truth. That's all true, by the way. This other one is also true. This one is about I've had the same boat since 1989. And when I got the boat built, I swore I would never collect too much stuff on the boat. And it's a promise I didn't keep. And this poem is about me trying to clean up my cabin, and it's called Too Hard to Throw Away. I decided to clean out my boat drawers, and it came without a warning. But I found so much stuff in there, it was just like Christmas morning. I found jars of bolts and cans of screws and a million things I'll never use. Hydraulic fittings, lots of O-rings, electrical tape, and some random things. Tons of zip ties, wire by the mile, hooks and hoochies, and a rusty file. Knives and scrapers, ganyons and twine, needles and fids, and monofilament line. Chunks of chain, a great big shackle, a half-used zinc, and some sport fishing tackle. Hyanotic parts and whale pingers too. Batteries and more batteries, old and new. Caulking guns and caulking tubes, various hose clamps and gear oil lubes. Old hydraulic motors, old net drum gears, a quart of blue paint I've had for 30 years. A fancy custom part in the bottom of the drawer. Not a damn clue what that sucker is for. Wax for survival suit zippers, extra pots and pans, putty knives and scrapers, and 2 splash zone cans. Manuals and more manuals, an old permit card. Throwing it away must have just been too hard. So much of this stuff I know I'll never use, so maybe I'll high grade all the trinkets and the rest I will lose. So I'm throwing out what I don't need, and I scattered it all across my cabin floors. But you know, 95% of that stuff is gonna end up back in those drawers. Thank you guys, hope to see you next year in Astoria.
Well, thanks, Doug. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the inventory. My wife's laughing at me over here. That's good to know we all have that company. That's lovely. Fred comes to us from Chesapeake, where he's a waterman there, and you come to us tonight from Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, and his pal and deckhand Bailey worked out some lovely work for us tonight. So thanks for joining us, you guys.
Thank you, John, and thank you everybody out there on the Pacific Coast for doing this year after year. It's a great event, and I know how much work it is for you all to put it on, but it sure is a lot of fun. And Bailey and I both hope to get out there next year and join you in person out there. We're going to work together, and Bailey's a videographer, and I'm a poet, and we're going to present two pieces. The first one is about shaft tonguing on Chesapeake Bay. It's called On the Washboards. The washboards are the gunnels or the small decks along the side rails of a workboat. And to harvest oysters with shaft tongs, which is the ancient way, the hardest way to get them, you stand up on the washboard and you have 12 to up to 26-foot heart pine shafts pinned together. And at the bottom of those shafts is two baskets, the rakes, the tong heads, and you shuffle them along the bottom and gather up a lick of oysters, which is one tong full, and bring them up and dump them on a Colin board. So this poem is about an old salt and his young friend on opposite washboards of a Chesapeake Bay boat. And the only other thing you have to understand perhaps is the tally is 5. Probably know that, but they count oysters in tallies because they say oystermen can't count above 5. That's probably a little bit accurate because the main prerequisites to be a shaft tonger, strong back and a weak mind. We're going to start this in 3 sections, and Bailey's going to start now with the morning.
Morning. Don't think that ebb tide ain't clipping now.
Same's the mill race. Can hardly make this lick.
Old easterly breeze is cutting too, coming out the snow hole.
My fingers just froze. Darn gloves wet.
I can't keep a pair dry after the first day.
Me neither. Guess it's part of the job.
Job ain't no good word for this. Sounds too dignified.
Part of punishment then.
You could be somewhere else, you know.
Wish I was right now. First hour is the worst hour.
Noon. We got 10 yet?
No, indeed. Way off today. No more than 8. Gonna have to grind hard for 3 tallies.
Tell me something I don't know.
Tell you what Lex told me when I told her we had 21 Friday.
Come on with it then.
She said, well, you must have had good licking then. I said, no, darling. A good licking is what we gave ourselves in catching them.
And then what?
Oh, I told her about us being the power tongers and all that trash.
You mean big lick, every lick, nothing but clean, clear hair?
Yeah, told her about bringing the hair and all that.
Time now you get back up there again and find some of that hair.
Guess we better. Ain't enough stuff against that bulkhead for a cat to lick.
Afternoon. Darn, it's nasty in this sleep. I'll have to eat extra pills tonight.
Yeah, my arms are limber than those 26s old Jerome used out on Snake Reef.
Why do you think they call me spaghetti arms? Can't believe you pulled 26s with no winder.
That's why I'm no good now. This job makes a boy out of a man.
Well, I'm 23 now and consider myself a man.
Talk to me again after this.
You might be hard to find by then.
If you're looking on a washboard, I hope I am.
We got 15 yet?
Expect so. You ready to get the killix?
Heck no, that's the best lick I've made today. Count them.
24 pretty ones. Must be in your goddamn genes. Your grandpa Jerome used to say the same thing right at quitting time.
Get to that board and clear me a hole, old man. I'm a power toner and I'm on the hair.
Come on with it then, honey. You hump them up. I'll wrap them back. Thank you.
Thanks.
The hair is when you're getting clear oysters. And that's the motto of the power tongers was clean lick, every lick, nothing but clean, clear hair. Now we're going to take you to the other principal fishery on Chesapeake Bay, which is the crab fishery for swimming blue crabs. And I'm going to turn it over to Bailey. I'm just going to make one point before I back out of here, because he's going to show you his film he made with the words of my poem put together with it. But in chasing blue crabs, the most prized thing you can do is catch double crabs, which is a mated pair. A Jimmy crab, a big channeler, a big aggressive male, and the small female that he carries under him until she sheds. And that's when they mate. And that's how more crabs come to exist. But those blue crabs are swimming crabs. To catch them in this old way, which is the trot line, which I and some others still do, you have to ease them off the bottom so they don't even know that they're swimming along with the bait. Then you hand dip them with a net. Okay, Bailey, take it away from here.
Great.
Thank you all again.
So I met Fred a few years ago, and I was blessed to go out on his boat with him. And because I'm a filmmaker and just love filming, I basically filmed the whole thing without really an intention on what to do with it. And then last year, I found out Fred was also a poet, and I was able to go back down to the Chesapeake and record one of his poems. And we put it to this kind of piece of video showing what crabbing is like on the Chesapeake, and it's a really nice little moment where you can see what it's like. So ready to play.
The ghost of old Gene Elliott cackles and curses as I haul the river edge of vanishing James's. Mean Uncle Gene, they called him, and bad luck to a man who sat near him, who tried to get a piece of the loamy mud just north of the now sunken shell road that carried long forgotten watermen to their homes on the once settled island that divides the bay from the river. He took that lay from Hansel Gohegan, took it on trust from a sick man. Never gave it back when the old salt recovered, sneered, when it comes to crabbing, I've got neither friends nor relations. And he guarded these edges when I was a young man. But he took too many kick-ass nor'easters, rolling in his 42-footer till the soda rolled out of his biscuits. He lusted and lunged for the double crabs, big jimmies carrying demure peelers that crawl to this pocket every summer, congregate here to replenish the species. They're loath to leave the river mud for the hard, bleak sand of the bay shore, so they cling to the stumps of vanishing Jameses as I cling to the life of a fisherman, inheriting this lay from a crazy man, making the night sail all summer, hurling bleary-eyed in a stream of phosphorescence to a haunted and disappearing island, then dropping my set in the starlight in the soft summer hours before dawn. 10 weeks here makes my season. As long as I hold enough bottom, surround enough doublers with snoozes. The peelers my daughter hoards in her shedders till they back from their sheds on the night tide, scooped helpless in their velvet perfection, while their uncaught sisters couple at James's, taking the seed from the jimmies on out to the bay from the river in ever diminishing numbers as my years slip away like the island, glowing with the fire of the nettles, grinding like the ebb on the shell road, rolling with the seas insistent, then softening like the dawns of the summers. till my ghost joins old Gene and the others, hauling down the edges of James's.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Bailey. Thanks, Fred. That's a lovely trip to the Chesapeake for us. A place most of us hadn't been in, a fishery a lot of us here aren't familiar with. So thanks for bringing that lovely work to us. Thanks for joining us. We'll hear from Abigail. Abigail comes to us from Gustavus, Alaska, just about every year. And when she can't get here, because we can't get here either, we're glad you came on the virtual tour this time, Abigail. Thanks for joining us again.
Well, thank you very much. It's always an honor to be here, and it's pretty incredible. Having grown up on the East Coast and eaten a lot of the crab that they were pulling up, that's a beautiful video. I have two pieces after I thank John, Jay, Amanda, and everyone else who puts this together. Virtual has to be incredibly difficult. A short piece from The Night Orion Fell, which is the book that brought me into this group. And that is that one of the rescuing pilots was Lieutenant Commander Ray Schultz. And I had the honor of being invited to his funeral at Arlington National Cemetery in October of just this past year. And so I wanted to read a little bit about that and then just a paragraph from the book. I read this because these two men understood and remembered exactly the same moment 23 years later, that deep and inscrutable place where life can meet death. In this particular instance, it didn't for either one of them, but both have seen it too close up. As Schultz approached the rear of the boat from the bow, Larry turned his head, looked up over his right shoulder at the helicopter. The two men fixed a glance frozen in time, an instantaneous scrutiny of situation and relationship each would remember and spontaneously imitate 23 years later. Larry sat in my living room imitating his own actions as he told me. Schultz described them by phone, and as he turned his head away from the speaker, his voice faded. Unconsciously, Schultz mimed the behavior of the man he had been about to save those many years earlier. Larry fastened his eyes into the pilot's, someone staring straight at him, into his eyes, into his life, gonna save him. And Larry watched the entire video of Ray Schultz's funeral at Arlington, which his wife had kindly put together since their son had COVID and couldn't make it to his own father's service. The other one I would like to read to you is a poem that I wrote. I started reading once going back to Nova Scotia. I was reading I picked up a book called Mariner's Weather, and well worth it, although I think I need to be a meteorologist to totally comprehend it. But this prose poem is based on the beginning of my reading of that book. Air and sea, we bottom fish of Earth's surface, live indifferent to our ocean of air. We, bottom fish of the atmosphere, scour the floor for food, farms that give us grain, ranches, beef, oceans, fish, our ancient ancestors from the sea. We hope draggers, be they plows or nets, don't destroy land. We hope no garbage swirling above, beside, or below drifts or pollutes our skin and cells. It was calm when I walked to the docks this morning. Now the wind blows more than gently, but I see no whitecaps yet. The nor'easter comes. Ships in harbor are safe, but that's not what they are built for. Sailors, be safe and come home. I shall walk up the hill to fix supper for the children who wait. Wait for their supper, wait for their father and brothers and uncles to come home. Snow comes horizontally. The air moves as does the sea, but we do not see the action of the air. A fine sailor senses the fluid action of air and sea, for his life and the life of his boat depend on it. A nor'easter churns weather counterclockwise to bring storms from the north to the Maritimes and New England. They blow varicolored autumn across fields and roads, slam rain to rattle windows, send drafts through homes, blow waves onto the streets of Scituate or the houses of Peggy Cove. Whitecaps go this way, then that, as they shake the sails and lines. Take a hunk of bread, your meal for the day, if you can stomach swallowing and keeping it. Head into the waves. Pray the wind does not rip all boom sails or lines. Pray we do not get close to the rocks of Yarmouth. It was calm when I walked, it was calm when I walked to the docks this morning. The nor'easter bangs on my walls and windows now. Sailors, be safe and come home to us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Abigail. It's nice to hear that from the comfort of our warm houses in a lovely winter night out here on the coast of Oregon. So thanks for bringing those to us. Thanks for joining us. All right, the news I get is that Ken's going to join us, and there they are. How good to see you guys.
Tough
Welcome
one.
back.
Not sure
We're
what happened.
live from New York.
Technical difficulties. Sorry.
It's not my fault. It's not her fault either. Yeah, we this is a song called "This Ragged Shore," and it sort of was inspired by a book I read that 200 years ago, sea voyages would last 2 to 3 years, and if you were shipwrecked, you would be it'd be another 2 years or so before anybody knew of your fate. And it's a lot different now. But when I fished in Alaska, I was on a shrimp boat that hit a rock, submerged rock, and almost sunk. And there's nothing more terrifying. So I'm writing this as a song imagining a sailor's last thoughts. This ragged shore. I sailed the sea since I was young, beneath the moon and stars, into the sun. I've been wherever the great whales blow. I called my home the blue meadow, and I'll not sail these seas no more. Lay me to rest on this ragged shore. This brigantine would spear the stars, her moonlit sails would light the dark. Into the wind she'd dip and glide, but she can't fight the black rock night. And I'll not sail my ship no more. Lay me to rest on this ragged shore. The cauldron sky, the dagger reef, the red dawn stains the bloody sea. Here now I lie, tattered and torn. No more will I e'er fight these storms. No more will I e'er fight these storms. The one I love, so far away, she waits for me in Nantucket Bay. I remember when we danced all night, and in the morning sun she held me tight. And I'll not see my love no more. Lay me to rest on this ragged shore. No, I'll not see my love, dear Lord. Lay me to rest on this ragged shore.
Thanks for your patience.
Well, thanks to you guys. Gee, that was just lovely. Thanks for your patience and seeing that through. What a lovely tune to come to us here and clear from New York. That still kind of amazes me. So from closer to home out on the other coast, Jonathan Amerongen, who's one of the reasons we have a FisherPoets Gathering, because it was he who put in the pages of Alaska Fisherman's Journal some of the earliest fisher poetry that we ever, well, the first fisher poetry we got to know years ago, when we gathered those people up and invited them to Astoria, and if it weren't for Van Ham, we might not have a FisherPoets Gathering at all. Anyway, Doreen and I say hello and thanks for coming.
Hey, Doreen. Hi. Hi, John. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here, and be great to be in Astoria with everybody, that's for sure. I have a song I want to sing in Easter. In the late 80s, I was in Dutch Harbor, and I was staying at the bunkhouse for a crab processing plant, and we ate and we had our breakfast with these two kids from Stockton, California, and they had worked in the meat processing business there, and they decided they were going to come to Alaska because there was no place to spend any money, and so great. And so I talked to them, and they said, when we got back to Stockton, we're going to have more money than we've ever had in our lives, and it's just going to be wonderful. And then they said, but I'd really like to be on a crab boat, because we're working 16, 18 hours a day, and these guys go out and they come back and sit at the dock, and the crab boat's full of crab. The boat's full of Apelio crab, hundreds of thousands of pounds of it, and they make big money. If I could just get one on one of those boats, I'd be in Fat City. It would be great. And so this is a song about a guy in a processing plant who really gets a chance to get on a crab boat and in Dutch Harbor and meets a guy at the Elbow Room, famous bar there, and gets a shot at it. And sometimes you get what you ask for. So that's what this story is all about. We were drinking beer, tossing darts one night at the Elbow Room. I was fresh out of school, working on the beach from midnight till the afternoon. My back was strong and my mind was weak, though it seemed all right to me to pack my boots and rain gear for a trip to the Bering Sea, where you scoop the ocean's riches, you just pull them aboard for free. Asked if I could, sure as hell I would, take a job on the Bering Sea. Now Jake was a grizzly engineer on the Crabber Arctic Cross. For a round or two he could get me aboard, he knew the old deck boss. When I quit my job at the Westward plant, I was giddy, I was free. Though I didn't have much, I was leaving Dutch for a job on the Bering Sea, where you scoop the ocean's riches, just pull them aboard for free. He asked if I could, said I would, take a job on the Bering Sea. Now the Arctic Cross was 100 feet with as many pots piled high. I climbed aboard and we headed toward the cribs under blackened sky. I said a prayer, a beam priest rock, there was nowhere now to flee. Like it or not, what I wanted I got, I was bound for the Bering Sea. But wind was blowing harder now, we were listing toward the lee. And Jake said, just you wait there, boy, till we get to the Bering Sea. Yeah, the wind was blowing harder now, we were listing toward the lee. And Jake said, just you wait there, boy, till we get to the Bering Sea. Well, 12 hours out, we were idling down, it was time to set our gear. I was chopping bait, filling jars, trying my best to hear what the mate was screaming through the howling wind. It made no sense to me, coming out of that wave-drenched speaker on the deck that was full of the Bering Sea. It made no sense to me, coming out of that wave-drenched speaker on the deck that was full of the Bering Sea. Well, his words came clear when from the rear I was clipped by a shifting pot. 6 by 6, 600 pounds, those suckers weigh a lot. Now it pinned me against the chopper and as the blades worked on my glove, well, I was ready to pack, I couldn't wait to get back to the shore drought that I loved. But the blades were getting closer now, they hacked my fingers 3. Chopped them into mincemeat for the crabs in the Bering Sea. Yeah, the blades were getting closer now, they hacked my fingers 3. Chopped them into mincemeat for the crabs in the Bering Sea. Gotta watch that bait chopper. Well, back at the bar in the Elbow Room, what stories I can tell of fingers lost on the Arctic Cross on a crab trip bound for hell. Well, it's been 6 years, but to order 3 beers, it takes 2 hands, you see. Oh yeah, 3. A reminder of my foolish love for life on the Bering Sea. 'Cause you risk your life for the riches, nothing comes for free. Oh, the money looks nice, but you better think twice, for you fish on the Bering Sea. Thank you very much, John and Amanda. All you pals out there on the water, here and there. We'll see you in Astoria, I hope. Smooth sailing.
Thank you,
Good.
Astoria.
Thanks for coming, John. Thanks for bringing that kid back to us. We love hearing from him. So next up is Colin Kaferle. Colin is a fellow I just met this year. He's been crabbing up in Puget Sound and comes from Orcas Island country there, and really thrilled that you've joined us this year, Colin. Hope you will for years to come. Give us a poem or two.
Thanks a lot, John. Yeah, my name is Colin Kaferle, and I fish commercially for Dungeness Crab on the FV Pinky B with my friend and captain, my captain, Em and Adam. Hey, kid. On the waters of the Salish Sea. And I'm going to read some poems inspired by those times. This first one is called For Sarah. Standing astern the deck of a crab boat in the Georgia Strait and gazing across the Boundary Pass, I think of a girl somewhere in that pale dawn just now rising, and of me rocking, like so many fishermen before me, up and down on lonely seas. This is entitled What Came Before. Lying in wait, we can see round the point to where the current and the wind have already met, lifting the water into white-capped teeth that froth and grind and spit. There is nothing left but to prepare, bait the remaining pots, take one last piss and zip up tight while we are still on the outside of that fury. For now we're running in, and Cowlitz is howling, as is the voice of Robert Plant from the little speaker that rolls back and forth on the wheelhouse roof. And it's as if there was never any time but now, that this is the whole of existence, this bay, this boat, this friendship, as we chop and slash through every pot, holding fast, holding close, until it's done, and we are clear, left to yell with high hearts that it's over, that we made it. And later back in town, the people come and go without a word. No hands to shake, no eyes to meet. No ex-lovers come to take pictures of the heroes. Not today, boys. Just the sound of crows and bad breaks that turn us back towards home. He to a voice that asks, what took so long? And I to a cabin, dark and cold. This is a haiku entitled Prayer to Mount Baker. O snowy mountain, watch over my friend and I as we go to sea. Crab fishing in America, Wild Bill. Wild Bill lays like an old walrus, belly out, eyes closed at 8 a.m. outside the dock store. He becomes oddly lucid when he speaks to the women passing by and growls at the men. It's said that he was once quite handsome and took to calling himself Sweet William. But wild is how most know Bill. We should be killing things that swim, he would lament while ashore and talk about bait, clams, and squid, the good shit, or just quietly watch the water. Once, speaking about a failed romance, he reared back and barked like a dog, affirming his freedom and good fortune, as if he had dodged a heart-shaped bullet. That's how I like to remember this place. Howling with reckless passion, running rich to the other side with a jug of plum wine and someone you want to kiss, always under the most impossible sky. The last poem I'm going to read tonight is entitled Lucky. Staring at the Vancouver skyline, miles away, and thinking of the people sleeping between its buildings, I wish for them, as I have, to look far from the deck of a boat and feel free. Thank you guys so much, and such a pleasure to be reading and listening to all these other amazing artists, poets, musicians.
Colin, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for paying attention and writing those poems for us. We'll look forward to hearing a lot more of it. Well, I thought I'd take a turn, and I'm trying to talk Doreen into joining me for this, but she's a little reluctant to. This is a true story. The names of the protagonists have been changed. And it reminds me a little bit of where we came from. It's from some time ago. I'm a set netter, and my family set nets up there in Bristol Bay, called Kelly Keeps Fishing. Kelly pulled his parka hood against the driven spray. High water hadn't been too good, 800 pounds all day. He tugged his beard, he scratched his head. He wished he were back home in bed. Another night on the Nushagak, 5 more hours until low slack. The night was gray, the skyline black. He turned to Pete and said, "Let's throw the pick and wait a bit. This net needs going through. We'll let some tide fall off the shelf and see what this wind's up to." So Peter let the Danforth go. In the ebbing tide, the skiff bucked and rolled. Pete took cork line, Kelly leads. They stacked the net, then Kelly said, "Oh, I suppose we'll just keep fishing." Keep fishing's what they done since June, as rising suns and rising moons dragged tide and salmon through the bay. They'd fished all night, they'd fished all day, through winds southwest to 20 knots, southeast with rain, still days so hot they sweltered in their waders. When fog descended, cold and damp, their bunks lay empty back at camp. Tedious, slim as it might get, Kelly kept the set net wet. And sometimes when the tide was low and Kelly still had weeks to go until the final sockeyes caught, he missed his wife a lot. He knew she labored hard down south, keeping up with every mouth of every child they'd had each May just before he went away. His wife, before she'd switched careers, could pick all night, could koozie gear, could keep her steady in the blow, then sleep still beside him in the bunk below while gentle rain swept the decks above. There it was they'd first made love, and tonight, in the skiff, as black rain fell, as white caps broke from every swell, Kelly said again. By dark the boys were good and cold. A bin of sockeye in the hold begged to be delivered as the Jackie M passed by outside, all deck lights, smoke, and driven spray. It was the best sight that they'd seen all day. They chased her on the rolling tide while in the bow Pete shivered. At the tiller, Kelly shivered too, and when at last they pulled up to the tender, Kelly climbed on board while Pete pitched off the day's reward. It wasn't much, but paid some bills, kept the bellies full and the fuel tanks filled. Pete hosed her down and gassed her up. Gratefully, he grabbed a cup of coffee in the galley. It was good for his morale. He'd been feeling a little whipped just then. Kelly, in the pilot house, still thinking of his lovely spouse, said, "Skip, how about that radio? Think that I could have a go? I'd like to call Deeny." So while rain beat the window panes and winds southeast whipped the weather vanes, and the skipper tried to be discreet, keeping his log and tickets neat, the table and the dashboard clean, Kelly raised Deeny. "How are you, love? It's me," he said. "How's everything at the old homestead? We're wrapping up here. It's been a good season, but sure slow now. So if for any reason you need me home a little early, to help with the house, the boys and girl, I could catch a plane on Tuesday." Across 2,000 miles of atmosphere, her lovely voice arrived as clear as moonlight. "Keep fishing," was all she said. The skipper winced and shook his head, and Kelly went back out there. Yeah, that's a true story. So, well, got a lot of true stories here tonight. George Wilson's going to bring us one. George comes from, he's from Portland, of course, but he's done a lot of fishing in Scotland, and you ought to see the pictures and hear the stories. You will just now. George, how good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I've got a true story here. It's called Har and the Old Red Sandstone. It's kind of a fairy tale. Har, spelled H-A-A-R, Hotel Alpha, Alpha Romeo, is a Scottish word for a particular sea fog which occurs between April and September on the East Coast. Meteorologically speaking, it is what happens when relatively warmer, moist air passes over the surface of the cold North Sea and condenses. It is then blown or drawn by convection currents to the shore, where it blankets the coast in an eerie, chilly, reality-altering ether. To experience it is to feel that it is alive. It scrambles over the cliffs and sea crags and creeps up the grassy braes. It fills the sea caves and slides through the great rock arches of the Bow Fiddle and Whales Moo, which are the most prominent landmarks of the headland where my village of Pornocky sits above the North Sea. It muffles the sound of the waves crashing on the shore, and it dampens the cries of the gulls, kittiwakes, and fulmars nesting in rookeries by the sea caves on the old red sandstone cliffs. Geologically so old that they don't contain fossils. Think of that, older than any life. The Har and the old red sandstone are well acquainted, or weel acquaint, as we say. What is the passing of time to the old red sandstone and the Har as they embrace in their soft caress once more? There must have been a first time. Will there be a last? There is a graveyard to the west of the village, atop, as they say in fairy tales, atop the cliff. And when the Har rolls in, it becomes a half-obscured theatrical set of granite headstones and marbled monoliths, markers for the dead, now dry iced by the Har. Crows perch on the headstones, curlews call from the shore, larks confused by the fog, still spiral up into the heavens searching for the sun. The old people, well, people are born old in Pornocky anyway, but the old people said, well, in truth, my great auntie Jeannie said, that when the Har rolled in, that you might see on the path on the cliff above the shore by the graveyard, that you might catch a glimpse of the ancestors. Taking a walk, a stroll, a perambulation through the vale of the Har. Because magic happens when the old red sandstone kisses the Har. You see the old folk, the ancestors, they like to stretch their legs after sic a lang lie doon, my great auntie Jeannie said. Then she cackled, like old crones always do in fairy tales. And if you walked back to the harbour, through the village, past the bed sheets and clothes pegged on the line strung between poles atop the cliff, to the house where my great aunt Jeannie lived, then maybe you could see through the Har the great fleet of sailboats, christened Zulus at their conception and construction in the time of the Zulu Wars. 100 boats crammed into that tiny harbour, their 9-man crews readying them for the upcoming Yarmouth herring season. Legendary sailing craft, 80 feet long with a huge mainmast of Norwegian spruce, so big around, the old people said, that you couldn't encompass it with your arms. So tall, the old people said, that when the Har rolled in, you couldn't see the top. And maybe, just maybe, if you were in Uganic Bay on Kodiak Island at the time of a salmon closure and observed the Har creep along Uganic, if you were in Uganic Bay at the time of a salmon closure and observed the Har creep along Uganic Island, then across the pass and slide up the bay on the incoming tide and roll smokily between and over and through the alders and birches and cottonwoods of the village islands. And you might see Wendy tending her garden beds or picking raspberries on the brae there. And if the Har ever rode up the Long Island Sound and over Block Island and up into Point Judith, then through the vale you might see a tall, broad-shouldered, slightly hunched figure tuning a bouzouki and telling tales and laughing at his own jokes. And if that's you and you did see John Campbell, say hello from me. For it is true what the old people say, that when the Har kisses the old red sandstone, magic happens. Everything is altered. Nothing remains the same. Time stands still. Time collapses. All times mingle in the Har. When it rolls in, you can smell the ocean of your youth, taste its salt, and be at peace. Har. HAAR, Hotel Alpha Alpha Romeo. Thank you. Back to you, John.
That was so good.
Yeah.
You gotta mute yours.
Thanks for casting the spell for us there, George. Thanks for taking us to Scotland, and thanks for bringing Campbell out for us on that. You know, we all miss him, and we're glad you found him in the horror there for us. Yeah, well, I think Moe might be with you nearby, and we're sure anxious to hear from you too, Moe. So, welcome. Thanks for joining us. It's so good to see you.
That was quite an ambush emotionally.
Yeah.
Kind of takes my whole composure. George has been running away, and yeah, okay.
He didn't tell you he was going to do that, maybe.
Oh, no, I don't know. He's a silent mon. He's got a silent mon. He doesn't speak except to you. And then to tell me that I sound like Wooly from The Simpsons. I miss you all so much. And I have to say, John, one of the things that made it easier for me to show up today is that you said it's just coming on to say hi. I'm just so furious about not being able to be with you all. And for those people who think about these things like the stars, I'm a Cancer. You know, I was born under the sign of the crab. And so I like to dig into my little hole as much as you guys might not believe this, and hide when I'm really hurting. And I just didn't want to come this year because I just don't want to not be with you. And George, you really did tank me there. Most of what I wanted to tell y'all was I got a day job, which is just shocking. And it's at a hospital. I work at a hospital. I work in the warehouse, and I'm kind of like the tender. So I go around the warehouse with my little boat, which is a cart, a small cart. It's like maybe like a 40, 50-foot tender. You go around and you get all the stuff, and then you go around to all the rooms, the supply rooms, and you walk past all the people that didn't get vaccinated and that are sitting in there and having to have lots of supplies delivered to them so that they can get back home to their families. And then I come back and then I do it again, just like a tender, just running around the hospital. And the funny thing is no one at the hospital can understand my metaphor or in my life. And I just was like, I can't wait till Fisher Poets when I can say, yeah, I got a job. I'm the tender at the hospital and I bring the supplies. It's not as friendly as the tender in some ways. And the journeys are not, they're not fraught. Although getting a day job, I have had to learn how to, fart with stealth, because that's not something on a boat, there's always equipment. No one can hear anything. People talk openly about rain gear farts. You kind of get one in there and then your rain gear pushes in and it blows the fart up in your face. And yeah, I have to talk about farts so I don't keep weeping. But so I guess what I figured out how to do is just like the cart wheels are loud. So I just do a lot of crop dusting is what it's called when you walk along. Anyway, I asked the guy why he hired me because my resume has actually made people laugh. My resume, my list of jobs. And he said, well, I hired you because, sometimes we get calls from the nurses or from somebody and they're like, we need this thing. And you're moving all through the hospital and you're representing the MSO, Material Services Operation. That's the MVMSO. And he said, well, I hired you because you're an MC. That's what you're an MC. You can talk to anybody. And also you worked on a fishing boat, so you're pretty tough and you've seen a lot of stuff, which is pretty great. I'm being trained by a guy named Randy, who has been on the job for 42 years. And he spends a lot of time saying things like, time for a cup of coffee. Take a load off. take a break. You need to take your breaks, which is very different than working on a tender or a fishing boat or anything like that. So I just kind of wanted to update y'all on that. But you know, I drive back and forth from work, and I listen to the news, and the news is not good, y'all. The news is bad. And I remember in 2003 when we kind of had a little bit of a war of aggression against Iraq. And I just want to be clear that I'm not saying anything mean about anybody who is in the armed forces. I just don't think that we should go to war at all. And I sang this song. And I was thinking about this song, and I sang it on the way home from work again. Because, I mean, even the Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest stories that's ever been written down that people have found. I'm sure there's others out there, but Gilgamesh he was a king who loved conquest, and his people said, you know, Gilgamesh walks the earth and we are the soles of his sandals. He just doesn't care. He just always wants to go to war and have more and more glory. And it's a hard lesson for a king to learn. And I'm so tired of being the people that the king has to learn from. I'm so tired of living in a city where people get shot and killed for standing up against that kind of brutality. And, you know, sailors felt that way too. A top man and an afterguard out walking one day. Says the top man to the afterguard, I'm in for to parade. For the lives of all sailors and the wrongs of all men. And whatever I to pray for, you must answer amen. First I'll pray for the bosun and his little stick. He shouts out all hands and gives us a lick. He strikes many a brave fellow and kicks him amain. And may the devil double, triple damn him, says the afterguard. Amen. Then let's pray for the purser who gives us to eat. Spewburgoo, rank butter, and musty horse meat. And weevily old biscuits that he gets the gain. And may the devil double, triple damn him, says the afterguard. Amen. Then we'll pray for the officers who hold up our due. They owe 3 years' money and our prize wages too. Let them fight their own wars over and over again. And may the devil double, triple damn them, said the afterguard. Amen. Yeah, it's hard to sing when your heart's just been broken by your husband. But miss you guys.
Mo, thanks for coming and bringing your whole heart with you. We rely on that. So thanks everybody for joining us. It's so encouraging to see our friends that we haven't seen in person in a couple of years now. We're pretty sure and pretty optimistic we'll be able to get together next year. We might have been able to pull it off this, but it was just not clear that was the case 4 months ago when we got started. So we thought we'd be careful. Anyway, this is a remarkable thing to see you coming from all over the country, and thanks for being here tonight. We're going to take a little break here shortly, and then at 8 o'clock, the FisherPoets Gathering will resume, and we'll see you there. There's a lot of activity. If you go to the webpage, there's a lot of stuff happening tomorrow. Starting at 9 o'clock in the morning, there are a number of workshops and presentations all through the day, free to the public. You just got to sign up there. And we do have a reading tomorrow A lot of folks are going to remember John Campbell, our dear friend. We miss. Going to read some of his stuff tomorrow. Campbell's Last Set at 4 o'clock. We also are going to miss Mick Hassan. He's our sound guy. We lost him this year too, and he was cheerful and helpful, and he's crossed the bar. So thanks all for being here. It's good to see you. We'll catch you again in about 20 minutes.